Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. As I drove home, a deep anger boiled inside me, and I could no longer contain my rage toward my wife, who had betrayed me. How could this happen? I shouted into the empty car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. All that effort, all that charm, and this is how the evening ends? The thought of her betrayal sparked another surge of anger. 15 years, 15 long years together, and now the truth of who she really was had finally come to light. When the light turned green, my thoughts shifted toward finding a solution. I grabbed my phone from the seat and made a call. "Katie?" I said, dialing the number of my former assistant, Katie Hoffelder. She had left her job largely because of my wife's jealousy and paranoia. Grace had always been tense when it came to Katie. Sure, Katie was beautiful, but it wasn't just her looks. It was her infectious energy, her bright smile that could light up any room. Yes, she had an amazing figure, but that had nothing to do with our strictly professional relationship. We worked well together. However, Grace, constantly insecure, couldn't bear the idea of me spending my workdays with someone like Katie. Night after night, she accused me of being infatuated with her. I tried to calm her, but her suspicions only intensified. I even discussed the tension with Katie, and she just laughed, brushing it off. Eventually, I helped her find a better job with my friend Brad. But even after we stopped working together, every time we ran into each other, she'd greet me with that same familiar, knowing smile and a playful wink, as if to remind me that the possibility was still there. "Katie," I said when she picked up, "I know it's late, but I need to talk." Her voice immediately softened, full of concern. "Alexander, what happened? Are you all right?" "No," I admitted tensely. I told her about the evening's events, the shame and humiliation that had engulfed me. "Wait," she interrupted, incredulous. "Grace left you for some guy she just met?" "Yes," I answered bitterly. "That's how much I mean to her after 15 years. "She's lost her mind," Katie snapped. "You deserve so much better. Listen, don't go home tonight. Come over. I have a spare room. You shouldn't be alone." "I'll be there in an hour," I said, genuinely grateful for her offer. Then, I called Mrs. Porter to arrange to pick up the kids and got in touch with my parents to ask if they could take them for the weekend. I explained what had happened, and their shock was obvious from the silence on the other end of the line. Finally, I made the difficult call to Grace's family. Her mother was in shock, unable to process what I was saying. "If you don't believe me, call her," I said firmly. "But she won't answer. She's likely with him right now. Better yet, drive by our house. Her car will be in the garage, untouched. If you want proof, come by tomorrow at 9 a.m. You'll see her walk in as if nothing happened." After dropping the kids at my parents' place, I returned home to pack a few things for the coming days. I took off my wedding ring and carefully placed it on an envelope left on the kitchen counter, addressed to her. Inside was a short note. "The divorce papers are on their way. I'll stay with someone who truly respects me. Thank you for our kids, but I hope you and the one you left me for rot in hell." Having done this, I picked up the phone again and dialed Katie's number. "Sorry for the delay," I said. "It's all right, Alexander," she answered warmly. "Would you like some coffee when you get here?" "That would be great," I replied, feeling a slight relief. When I arrived at her place, she opened the door before I even had a chance to knock. Katie was dressed casually, in a robe that barely reached her knees, and welcomed me with a warm embrace. The moment I crossed the threshold, something shifted between us, and I realized that my world was about to change in ways I hadn't expected. The moment she hugged me, tears just started flowing from my eyes. She led me inside, gently closing the door behind us. "Everything's okay now. You're with a friend," she whispered, softly patting my back and shoulders. "How about we make some coffee?" she suggested. I dropped my bags and collapsed onto the couch. "Thank you, Katie. You have no idea how much this means to me." She gave a warm smile. "I do know. That's what friends are for." "Yeah," I replied bitterly. "Friends who get fired for being too kind." She chuckled quietly. And don't forget, you helped me get that promotion with Brad. Her laugh was light, but it only fueled my frustration. Yeah, and that jealous woman kept accusing you of trying to steal me away from her. In the end, I had to fire one of my best employees and dearest friends. And how does she thank me? She hooks up with some guy she barely knows within just a few hours. Heartless. I took a sip of the hot coffee she offered. Sorry for the words, I added quietly. She sat down next to me on the couch, gently placing her hand on my shoulder. Don't hold back, she teased with a smile. Hey, the truth is the truth, however you say it. So tell me what's really going on. I want to know everything, she gently insisted. I took a deep breath, resting my head on her hand. Where do I even start? Suddenly, I jumped off the couch, excitement surging through me. Wait, how could I forget this? I grabbed my phone and my voice was filled with impatience. I recorded Grace dancing with that guy at the party. You need to see this. I found the video and showed it to her. She was supposed to have a romantic evening with me, but instead, she's dancing with some random guy. Katie's eyes widened, and she covered her mouth with her hand. Oh my God, she's literally all over him. Exactly, I muttered, shaking my head. Without thinking, I sent the video to everyone in our circle, her parents, my parents, her sister, and a few colleagues. In the message, I made it very clear. Grace chose to leave me tonight for Marc Lavalier. As you can see, this isn't a joke. Shortly after this video, she ran off with him, and now she's with him. She didn't say a word to me, not even a glance. I'm sure you can all guess what they're up to now. When you hear about our divorce, you'll know why. Sorry for ruining the day. I included Katie in the list, just in case Grace decided to check who I had sent this message to. Katie hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry, Alexander. Thank you, I whispered, feeling her support. Just then, my phone buzzed with a new notification. Katie noticed and said, You should check your Facebook. Before I could respond, she had already pulled my laptop out of my bag and opened it on the coffee table. Katie knew exactly where I kept everything, a perk of working together. By the time I finished my coffee, she had already loaded my Facebook page. There was a post from Brad, Katie's boss and a mutual friend of ours. Someone else at the party had captured a video of the same Marc, the very guy who had gotten too close to Grace on the dance floor. The post read, Lavalier strikes again. Tonight he seduced a married woman in her 40s, danced with her, got her excited, and took her back to his mansion for the night. Her poor husband didn't even realize until it was too late. When he tried to intervene, 2 bodyguards blocked his way. How much longer will this go on before someone stops this? As I scrolled through the comments, I saw numerous people sharing similar stories of how they had fallen prey to this man's predatory games over the past few weeks. I sent him a friend request and immediately took a screenshot. Without delay, I posted it on my Facebook page and on Grace's as well. However, there was no reaction, no likes, no comments. Soon, a wave of exhaustion washed over me. Katie noticed how drained I was and gently guided me to the guest room. I barely made it to the bed before collapsing onto it, still fully clothed. In the morning, I found myself lying in the same position I'd fallen asleep in, covered with a blanket that someone had kindly draped over me. With a foggy mind, I shuffled to the bathroom and splashed water on my face to wake up. Katie's voice floated from the hallway, saying breakfast would be ready in 10 minutes. She suggested I take a shower to fully wake up. By the time I reached the kitchen, the smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee stirred my appetite. What are your plans for the day? Katie asked as I sat at the table. Honestly, I'm not sure, I replied uncertainly. Maybe I'll show up when that jerk drops her off? I added, unsure of what to expect. I wouldn't advise it, she warned. Why? I asked, confused. Let her feel just a fraction of what you felt yesterday, Katie explained. What if she invites him inside? Doesn't your beloved security system capture everything? It hit me. You're right, I said, surprised I hadn't thought of it myself. If they went inside, it could work to my advantage. And that's exactly what happened. The surveillance cameras captured everything. The guy pulled up in his convertible, walking Grace, still in her blue dress, to the door. Was this a showy gesture? Was he trying to intimidate me? Grace shouted something after him, but he ignored her. Then she invited him in. He wasted no time, pulling her into a passionate kiss. At first, Grace hesitated, but she soon gave in. His hand slid down her thigh and she responded, lifting her leg around his waist, pressing herself against him more tightly. He grabbed her firmly, lifting her effortlessly as she wrapped her legs around him, holding him close. His kisses moved down her neck, and I heard Katie beside me start breathing more heavily. The footage showed his hands gliding down her legs, and I couldn't help but sigh. This was my moment to act. This wasn't my home anymore. I reached to close the laptop when suddenly, a new image popped up on the screen. Grace's parents had arrived at the house. Katie burst into laughter. "Wait, we have to see this," she insisted. And that's exactly how it played out. Grace's parents walked in through the open door and headed to the living room just as the guy pressed Grace onto the couch. Her mother's horrified scream pierced the air. "Oh God, it's true!" she cried out. The guy jumped up, visibly shocked, and shouted, "Who the hell are you? Can't you see we're busy?" Realizing how quickly things were spiraling out of control, I immediately dialed 911. "My wife is being attacked in my home," I tried to sound calm. "Her parents just walked in, and this guy looks like he's going to go after her father. Please send the police and an ambulance urgently." We dashed to my car, and by the time we got to the house, my parents had already parked behind his convertible. I found a spot a bit down the street, just as a police car pulled up. 2 officers rushed toward the house and I followed them in. Inside, chaos was unfolding. The guy, whose name was Lavalier, stood over Grace's father, ready to kick him again. Her father lay curled up, covering his head with his arms. Grace was sobbing hysterically, her face in her hands. One of the officers drew his gun and ordered Lavalier to put on his pants, and Grace to cover herself. Once Lavalier was dressed, they cuffed him and escorted him out of the house. Grace's mother ran over to me, tears streaming down her face, collapsing into my arms. "I didn't believe you," she sobbed. "How could this happen? How could my daughter do this? To me, to you, to all of us?" An ambulance arrived, and the paramedics quickly knelt beside Grace's father, assessing his condition. Slowly, he eased out of his defensive position, blinking as his eyes adjusted to the room's light. When he saw Grace, he inhaled sharply but then grimaced, his face contorted with pain. "It looks like you have a few broken ribs," one of the medics informed him gently. "Try not to take deep breaths. Breathe slowly and shallowly. We'll take you to the hospital. Don't speak, just focus on your breathing." His gaze found Grace once more, and with effort, he whispered contemptuously, "Wretch," shaking his head in clear condemnation. Grace's face twisted with a surge of shame. She lowered her head, and tears rolled down her cheeks. The paramedics carefully placed her father on the stretcher and carried him out of the house. As this unfolded, more people began arriving. Neighbors, my parents, my children, and several old friends. Shock was evident on every face, disbelief reflected in their eyes. 2 even took out their phones, recording everything on video. I waved them off and said, "Thank you for coming, but I'm sorry you had to witness this. Please go home." In the end, only Grace's mother, my father, and I were left in the room. My mom, always pragmatic, quickly took charge of the children, leading them to a cafe to shield them from what was happening. She had always been a lifesaver in moments like these. I turned to Grace, unable to suppress my anger. "Grace, you're in serious trouble," I barked. "Go take a shower and change into something decent." Crying, she gathered up her blue dress and hurried upstairs. The 3 of us, Grace's mother, my father, and I, sat in a heavy, stifling silence. Grace's mother shook her head again, her embarrassment palpable. "I don't even know where to begin, Alexander. I'm ashamed. How could I ever apologize for this?" Before I could respond, my father intervened to diffuse the tension. "I've known Grace for over 15 years. You don't need to apologize for her. She was once a girl any parent could be proud of. She played soccer, excelled in school, and was full of life. Then something changed, and she became someone else. This isn't your fault," he continued. "I can imagine how painful it is, but you're not to blame. She made her own choices." At that moment, we heard a faint sigh. Grace had come back downstairs, her hair damp from the shower. She must have overheard everything. "You're right," she whispered, sitting on the staircase. "It's all my fault. I was selfish. I'm a worthless wretch." Tears began streaming down again, and she covered her face with her hands. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" It was the first time she had spoken to me directly since that night when she snuck off to be with the man she was involved with. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her there's always a way to make things right. But I couldn't, not after everything we'd been through. She left us, me, the children, without a second thought. Even last night she went to him without looking back. I knew I had to make her understand the damage she'd done. "You asked your sister-in-law to tell me where you were going," I said coldly. "Then you turned off your phone so I couldn't reach you. What if something had happened to one of your children, Grace? You abandoned them. This isn't just irresponsibility. You're not just careless. You're cold and cruel. This wasn't an accidental decision. It was intentional." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "This wasn't a mistake at a party or a casual fling at work. Step by step, you chose to walk away from the family. You distanced yourself from the children and from me. So tell me, Grace, how do you plan to fix this?" The three of us sat in tense silence, arms crossed, as the weight of the situation hung over us. Suddenly, Grace sprang to her feet, fresh tears streaming down her face, and she ran upstairs, slamming the door so hard the house shook. A few minutes later, my mother's car pulled into the driveway. "We'll keep the kids until tomorrow evening, or longer if you need more time," my father offered. "Thank you, Dad," I muttered, still processing everything that had just happened. My phone vibrated with a message. "Are you coming back or staying?" That's when it hit me. I hadn't even noticed she'd left. Grace's mother looked up from her phone and said, "The hospital just called. We can go see him now." "I'm already on my way, right behind you," I replied, grabbing my phone to text Katie. "I'm heading to the hospital to see Grace's father. Afterward, if you'd like, I'll come home to you." Katie responded quickly, "I'll make dinner." With that, Grace's mother and I headed to the hospital. As we were driving, another message came, this time from Grace. "Where did you disappear to?" I ignored it. Let her feel what it's like when someone vanishes without a word. When we entered her father's room, his condition was worse than I'd anticipated. He was conscious, but just barely. His face lit up, as much as it could under such circumstances, when he saw his wife. Grace's mother gently took his hand and whispered, "My hero," and tears rolled down her face. I shook my head and took his other hand. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this, Dad. The police want you to file a report." It was time this man faced consequences. He had finally gone too far, and the law was ready to catch up with him. A sudden thought struck me. I'll contact the news outlets. Someone will want to cover this scumbag. I stepped into the corner of the room and called the detective who had broken up the fight at my house, asking for contacts for the district attorney and the press. While I was on the phone with the assistant prosecutor, a doctor entered the room to examine Grace's father. I handed my phone to the doctor, asking him to document the injuries: several broken ribs, a fractured arm, a crushed nose, and internal organ damage. Once they finished, another idea dawned on me. I took my phone back and said, "By the way, my security system recorded everything. Should I send the footage?" "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. We'll need every piece of evidence. They'll hire top lawyers to paint your father-in-law as the aggressor, so every bit of proof will be crucial." I handed the phone to Grace's mother as her husband drifted off to sleep under medication. Telling her I needed to deliver the evidence, I left the hospital. When I got home, Katie had kept her word. A simple yet delicious dinner was waiting on the table. While I ate, she asked, "Would you like me to get in touch with Daryl Bates from Channel 6? He's married to my sister. Maybe he can help." "That would be amazing," I said. "I'm sure he'd be interested in this story. His channel broke ties with the network that protects people like that scumbag, so he'll have no reason to hold back. I'll prepare the video." For the next 3 hours, I downloaded and organized the surveillance footage into 2 parts. The first segment showed Grace and the scumbag arriving in my living room and then their revolting behavior. The second part captured the arrival of Grace's parents. Since Katie and I were out of the house at the time, it was the first time I saw what had actually happened. Grace's mother, always quick-witted, noticed the convertible in the driveway and stopped the kids while her husband went inside to handle the situation. "What the hell are you doing with my daughter?" he demanded, storming in. The guy was caught off guard by the sudden intrusion, but when Grace screamed, her father instinctively rushed to protect her. Without warning, Lavalier struck Grace's father, knocking him to the ground, then ruthlessly kicking him while he was down. Grace's father only raised his arm to shield himself, making no attempt to fight back. Standing beside me, Katie watched the video on my phone, her eyes widening in horror. "Daryl," she said quietly, shaking her head in disbelief. "You need to see this. It's worse than anything we've seen in a long time. This could turn into a case bigger than the Ray Rice incident." After she gave me his contact details, I quickly sent the video clips. The moment I heard the confirmation sound for delivery, she resumed her phone conversation. "You've got an exclusive. This is bigger than any scoop." Then, with a sharp tone, she added, "Destroy him." Just then, my phone vibrated. It was Grace calling. I decided not to answer, letting the call go to voicemail, and instead sent her a message. "Where are you?" I wanted her to experience the same uncertainty she had put me through. However, moments later, I changed my mind. I finally replied, "I'm with Katie," and left it at that. When Grace tried to call again, I ignored it, allowing it to go to voicemail once more. Meanwhile, I forwarded the video of the assault to the police and the prosecutor's office. By the time all this was done, it was already Saturday. I decided to call Grace's mother to check on her father. "He's resting now," she told me. "The police already came to take his statement. They mentioned having a video showing a football player attacking him as he tried to protect our daughter." "Mom," I said, "I'm going to consult some lawyers. We're going to sue Grace's boyfriend, his team, and the NFL. Once I find the right attorney, I'll pass along their contact details to you. One way or another, that guy will pay for what he did to Dad." Later that evening, I took Katie out for dinner at a small, cozy Italian restaurant. When we returned home, I barely had the energy to change before collapsing on the guest bed and instantly falling asleep. By Sunday morning, I began checking my emails, texts, and voicemails. I deleted all messages from Grace without reading or listening to them. A few messages caught my eye, urging me to turn on the morning news or check the newspaper. It turned out Katie's brother-in-law, who works in television, used his connections, and there it was, front-page news, not just in the sports section, with the headline, "Lavalier arrested for assault." I couldn't resist a smile. Leave it to the journalists to blow up any story. The article, though cautiously worded, mentioned that the investigation was ongoing and not all witnesses had been interviewed. Nevertheless, anonymous sources claimed that the player was arrested on charges of assaulting a married woman and attacking her elderly father, who tried to protect her. The player, his team, and the NFL declined to comment, citing the ongoing investigation. We recorded the news segment on Channel 6, which led with the same story. The broadcast showed heavily edited footage, blurring out intimate parts of Grace and her lover, but it was clear enough to show him verbally abusing the elderly man and then brutally kicking him as he lay defenseless on the ground. It was damning evidence. Since Sunday is usually a slow news day, national outlets quickly picked up the story from Channel 6. By the end of the day, it was obvious. The player's career was over. His charities severed ties with him. His team suspended him, and the NFL, learning from past incidents like Ray Rice's case, made a stern statement that violence would not be tolerated. His endorsement deals were immediately terminated. Several lawyers reached out to Channel 6, offering to represent my interests. Katie, who had previously been my assistant, resumed that role, now as my manager. Together, we selected an attorney to pursue financial compensation from the player, his team, the league, and the sponsors who supported him. Our attorney also represented Grace's father's interests. I hired a separate lawyer to handle my divorce. Although I felt a strong urge for revenge, I chose a simple resolution, leaving Grace without a home or custody of the children. She was utterly shattered. Her parents took her in, but only for a week. The financial aspect didn't concern me, knowing I'd receive a substantial settlement from the player, his employers, and the league. Marc Lavaliere's troubles deepened as other spouses began coming forward with horrifying stories of their own. During the investigation by our legal team, numerous letters and emails emerged, sent to the team with warnings about his predatory behavior at Friday night events and violent conflicts teammates had instigated against husbands trying to intervene. Once it became clear the team ignored these warnings, the owner was forced to sell the franchise. Though he managed to secure a decent amount, nearly everything was lost in a class action lawsuit, as numerous victims sued him for compensation. Since many of Lavaliere's misdeeds occurred at the Breeze restaurant, the legal battle extended to that establishment. Despite being at the peak of his career, no team wanted anything to do with him. Katie's brother-in-law, using his influence in the media, ensured that every time Lavaliere attempted a comeback, videos resurfaced, reminding the public of his disgrace. Public outrage left him with no chance of returning to the field. After some time, he decided to leave football and took up work at a construction site. Even then, he couldn't achieve anything as modest as sponsorship from a used car dealership, which would have been a small success for him. Once the dust settled after the chaos of our divorce, I realized that there were a few $1,000,000 sitting untouched in my bank account. Over the summer, I took the kids on a week-long vacation to Disneyland. Although they were still processing the effects of our separation, the extra love and attention from both sets of grandparents softened the blow. Shortly after I filed for divorce, Katie welcomed me into her life, and to be more precise, into her bed. To say I was well-versed in matters of physical intimacy would be an understatement. In this area, I had everything I could want. Every time I bought her new lingerie, she wore it that very night. At public events, she was always by my side. Even when she danced with others, she was respectful and returned to me without delay. Our love grew stronger over the years, and together we had twins whom we adored and fully supported. And most importantly, Katie never once made me feel inadequate. Being with her was a constant source of happiness. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.